Welcome to the Fire from Two Windows podcast, where we take a deep dive into different aspects of the fire service. My name is Matt Humnicke, and I am joined with my co-host Lou Caminelli. We want to express that these are our own opinions built by experiences and education while honing our craft. These are not the opinions or directions from our various employers. We're out here on our own to spur conversation and help level the playing field for all. Good evening, Lou.
What's up, Matt? What's going on tonight?
You said you had a topic you wanted to discuss tonight. What do you got?
Just because we've had a lot of new hires, and especially like on my group where we work, we just got 3 new Probies, and it just seems like we're constantly training Probies and stuff's constantly evolving with what we got to do. So I thought we'd talk about how we go about training our Probies here, and how, what are my roles as a company officer, and how you go about it as pretty much the senior guy in your group or one of the senior guys in your group. So figure we have a discussion about how we go about training Probies and make them, they come out of the academy, they have the skills that they're taught in the academy, and what we need to do in the firehouse to make them the firemen that they need to be for the next 20, 25 years, hopefully.
Yeah. We got quite a few lately. At least last 3-4 years. Right after COVID, or kind of the middle of COVID, is when we started taking on the program here at the county, and a lot of new people coming through. Good dudes, good people actually. Both all firemen alike, all firefighters alike. But we are seeing some challenges in bringing them up, and as we've mentioned on the couple other podcasts that we've done, we have to introduce some, let's call them life skills, mostly based around the mechanics or mechanical properties of things. But it's kind of wild that it's shifting in just a small time frame. We're seeing an evolution, we'll say, for what we have to teach them. So we kind of break it down into 2 categories, and one is the skills portion. All right. However, we handle that in each department, agency alike. And then the other side is what do you really need to be in the fire service? So where do you want to start?
Well, we could start with the spectrum of firemen that we're getting. When I got hired on the job, which is back in 2007, and I had 2 years of experience as a volunteer. And then, I was pretty much kind of raised in a firehouse, with my dad being a volunteer fireman where we are now. My grandfather was a volunteer fireman, so I had kind of the knowledge of what was going on in the firehouse, what they did. I would see my dad, the plectron pager would go off, and he'd run out of the house, go on a fire call, and I kind of had a idea of what the fire service was about. My grandfather, general contractor and a volunteer fireman, so he was always helped me out with the tools and stuff, like let me tinker with tools and stuff like that. But now, I mean, we got guys in the firehouse now that aren't even old enough to drink. I think we hired a couple of guys that were 19 years old.
Yeah,
they were born before 9/11. So we're running into Gen Z. I'm on depending on what you look at, I'm either a Gen X or a millennial. It's like, what do they call it? A geriatric millennial, I think, is the new term for me. Yeah. I remember rotary phones. There was no internet. I was kicked out of the house at sunup and told not to come back until sundown. And my parents didn't know the wiser what I was doing or what I was getting into. I mean, but the neighborhood had, all the neighborhood parents watched out for what we were doing. But the kids that are, I say kids because they are, the hires that we're taking on now, they don't have, it seems like they're not having that experience anymore. But we have hired a couple older guys on, I think The last one we just hired is 42. So he's going to be able to put 20 years in and then retire. So he's at that adult learner level. But most of the hires that we're bringing on now are they're out of high school. Some never even went to college. They have really not many life experiences. And and the fire service is, and this is a problem you hear on multiple podcasts. You see it on multiple Instagram posts or Facebook posts complaining about, the new fire service, new fire service. Well, this has been going on for every generation. The previous generation is going to complain about the next generation that they don't know what they're doing, and we have to recalibrate how we teach, how we get across to them, and how we conduct drills. And I know you've seen it. I mean, you do a pretty good job running the saw station during truck week, and you go into a deep dive because these kids they've never even touched a power tool. And when I say a power tool, even like a battery operated screw gun. And now we're handing them a gas powered K970. It can be intimidating to them.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what do you think we got to go put across? How do you think we should be talking to these young kids to get them up to the level where they need to be confident in doing the skills that they need to perform with stuff that they've never done before?
I don't know if the majority of people would agree with me on my answer, because it's actually only recently changed for me. But I think the answer is with respect. They don't know what they don't know, and at some point, we didn't know what we didn't know. We're As we identify all these problems, we call them problems. It's really a good challenge for us to evolve and evolve appropriately. It really surrounds this idea of parents and or home life. I don't mean that everybody needs two parents, no divorce, stuff like that. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I mean by parents is the raising aspect. When you were growing up, and I know I had it as the pretty similar experience. I had parents at home. Yeah, one was a working parent, one was the stay-at-home parent, and both of them taught us life skills as well as kept us up on our homework and made sure that our academics didn't suffer. And then, of course, there were a million kids in the neighborhood, so there was always something to do, but there was always something to learn. And in my experience growing up, I felt like my parents always wanted us to constantly learn, question. But take from my dad, for example, he was eager to show us every tool that he had and how it worked, how it was manufactured. He was excited about that. Was his passion in life. And he took the time at each age when it seemed appropriate to him to show us each. You start with box wrenches, screwdrivers, and as you get older, maybe it's BB guns, because those are tools, not toys. And then, it's at some age, and I can't identify at this point, lawnmowers, weed whackers, eventually chainsaws. And where I'm going with this is that there was a respect with these tools that was happening at a younger age as you advance through each stage of your young life into young adult life. When I say with respect to these, what we're calling kids, to us, they feel like kids because they have not gone through those same experiences. Their home life didn't start off the way ours did, societally, I mean. We had families all the way through our childhood and maybe into our young adult lives. We had both, like I just said, my mom always was the stay-at-home mom. My dad was the working person. And at some point near the end, let's say my teenage years, my mom started going to work, so picked up a job again. She worked before that, but then she gave it up to be a stay-at-home mom. The next generation slowly phased into where both parents had to work. So maybe both parents were working before they started having children, but definitely all the way through children, both parents were working. So that time to instill these skills, these mechanics, all these, these different little life goals and learning lessons just weren't available to them. Now we're seeing that even the generation just after that, where now the parents never had those skills. So it's not like they don't have time to teach, they don't know how to teach it. And that's the area where we land in today with the people coming into the academy. Their parents didn't have time, or maybe perhaps didn't have that skill, was not applicable to their family life set. So again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not blaming parents. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that those skills were not fundamental in families the way it was way back when, we were growing up. So when I say that's a good challenge, that shows us how much growth we have to take into account in the fire service, where you have to use saws. Saws are a good example. You have to mow the lawn at our work. We got a lawn day. We got to go mow the lawn. We got to weed whack. We got to snow blow in the winter. You got to shovel. Shovel, I think, is pretty easy to operate, but sometimes these things break down and you got to know the parts. You can't just send it out to the local shop. Not every place has a shop nearby. You might be fixing these tools in the back of the truck bay.
It's
So we
funny,
got to
man.
teach all those little things.
I just wrote a note down about shoveling, and my cousin is a foreman in the town I live in for the DPW, and he was telling me about some of the summer college kids that come in and work for like temp work during the summer hours, do like simple landscaping things for the town. And he was watching this college kid. He said he's maybe 19, 20 years old, never used a shovel before. He was scooping up dirt with the shovel, and instead of taking the dirt and just off the shovel and dumping it off the shovel, he would scoop up the dirt and then push the dirt off his hand, or push the dirt off the shovel with his hand into the pile. And
he's not from around here. I mean,
well, yeah, no, he grew up in the town. And
this is dirt.
It was just dirt. They were doing simple landscaping at a park, and like you said, my dad is not. He's not that he wasn't. He is not mechanically inclined. But one thing he did do, he built a box. Now, it wasn't a sandbox. It was just he put some 2x4s together, and it was a dirt box. Essentially, it was just a little box that we kept all that. This was the area we were allowed to dig in. And I remember that was the most fun thing I would do when I was that young. What little kids do is they just dig, dig, dig. And it dawned on me as like, kids aren't even doing that anymore. They're not even using shovels anymore to dig in, play around in dirt. Because this kid and my cousin is maybe 5 years older than me, 5, 6 years older than me. And he had to show this 19-year-old college kid how to use a shovel. And I was like, I'm going through that as an instructor at the company officer level, and when I'm instructing at the academy, we have to show them simple mechanics with tools and how to use them. It's a shovel. You would think that would be ingrained as a boy. I think that's in your DNA. It's how to dig with a shovel. But we get this kind of conundrum when we have these kids come into the academy. Some have some job experience, some have zero job experience. Some come from, they might get out of high school and they do the college EMT class and they get signed on to a commercial ambulance. So they have some first responder experience. We get some volunteers from some agencies that are around us, but we still get the recruit that has zero fire service experience. And even some of the ones that have fire service experience, like I've experienced this on a couple of the Probies that we've had on my group, where I've had to teach them how to swing an axe, and teach them how to swing in the academy, and then and I'm jumping ahead when they get on the rig, and they're assigned a rig, and it's like we have to show them how an axe or even a sledgehammer is even utilized. So with that being said, with this learning curve being so different nowadays, that might be the reason why academies are getting longer than what they previously had to be. It's like 3 weeks of firefighter 1 and firefighter 2. Then you go to, what is it? What's after that? Hazmat or whatever, truck company ops, engine company ops, so on and so forth. And I mean, we're up to 14 weeks at the academy now, where my academy was 11 weeks. 11 weeks of instruction. It was over 13 weeks. We had 2-week breaks for the fire academy had to kick us out for a week because they had other stuff going on in schedule. I think FDIC kind of fell in between there, so we lost a bunch of instructors. But in over 17 years, the academy has increased by 3 weeks of instruction. That's 120 more hours of instruction that we've added to the academy in 17 years.
Yeah, that's significant.
And I believe back in the early 90s, the academy was only 7 or 8 weeks long. So it seems like we're on a trend of increasing our instruction 120 hours every 15 years. So what's it going to be like 5 years from now? What's it going to be like 10 years from now? Are the academies going to be 6 months long? Are they going to be even longer because we just don't have that we have to teach them more than what they're expected to come into the fire service with?
Yeah, let's call those prerequisites. Assumed prerequisites, like using the saw. That's a pretty standard answer, but we're trying to take that into account, and it's not going to be linear. It's going to be kind of a exponential, I think, increase over time. Because the other side of that is, as much as you're adding to the teaching, how much of it is sticking to the point where you can pass the academy, but post academy where we have to continue with some skill sets. There's plenty of people who have rolled through there. They can pass it once or twice, say X skill set once or twice just to get through that week. Maybe it's a minor thing. And then when they get out of the academy, it's like it never stuck. Do we take more time in the academy for that individual? Do we expand it for the whole class and take an extra day to go over those skills, or make that a whole week? Ladders come to mind. People throwing ladders seems like a pretty basic skill. It's a ladder. Painters throw ladders. Anybody that does construction throws ladders. We're not the only people to do it. So why do we see such a problem with that skill sticking? Perhaps it's our teaching. Maybe we're just not teaching it right. There's plenty of instructors, so you're getting it from many viewpoints and many angles to get the same skill done or JPR done. But why do we need to work so much post-academy to kind of go back through there? We're not seeing a lot of that stick, a lot of finer points. What about that?
It's funny you bring ladders up, because I remember when my old man was confident enough for me to climb a ladder to clean gutters. That's a rite of passage in my family, is cleaning my old man's gutters. And then it's like when my sister got married, my brothers and I looked at my brother-in-law and it's like, all right, bro, we've done it for however many years. You're next up. This is how you're going to earn your right in the family, and start cleaning my old man's gutters. I still got to go over it.
So this was, you said rite of passage, and for some reason I'm seeing the Tom Sawyer thing. Like, you really got swindled. Hey man, you really want to be part of this? Oh, this is a lot of fun. You want something that?
But so I mean, maybe 8 or 9 years old, my old man's making me throw the Home Cheapo ladder up there, aluminum ladder up to the gutters, and get up on the roof and clean gutters when I was 8 or 9 years old. Because my older brothers were, they're like, Louis can do it. He's going to go do it. So, I mean, but you said the retention thing is, it's funny you say that, because we have guys that were hired at 19 years old, and we have one that was just hired at 42 years old, and I see a different style of retention. And I had to sit down and talk to one of them, and I said, hey bro, do you go to college? Yeah. Did you take notes? Yep. I go, are you taking notes while you're on probation? He goes, no. I go, you need to carry a notebook. And I'm not saying you need to write down everything, but something that's important that we tell you to do, or, a tip, or if you see someone doing something that might work for you, I said, write it down. You might not ever have to go back and reread your notes, but just the physical aspect of writing something down. Because when you write it down, you're reading it as well, and you're physically writing it. Your retention is going to be that much better. I mean, I have notebooks filled with stuff that I will probably never look at again. But there are some notes that I just forget, but I wrote it down. I got to go back and reference it. We talked, there was one. It was one of the earlier podcasts when we were talking about searching, and it was the acronym that I still can't remember, and I got to go reference it. It was signal, species, something else, something else, something else. So yeah, I got to go reference it. But I know where it is, and I know where I can reference it. But there's some stuff that I just write down, and it's in my memory just from writing it down. And I had this discussion with this gentleman about it, and I hope he does it because it seems like we're having a problem with retention with him. He gets the skills done, but then the next day it's like, we talked about this. I asked him a question, and I say, hey, we just talked about this. Can you tell me what we just did right here? And he's like, I don't remember. It's like, bro, we just talked about this a day ago. Why don't you remember? So I think note taking, it's a skill that I think has gone away. Maybe that's something that we need to emphasize a little bit better in the academies, is taking notes. One of my probies that I had, he's on my rig now. I had him earlier on, and they got reassigned. And he's a generation younger than us, and he takes notes on his phone. He takes a picture of what we're doing. If we're setting up ropes or something like that, he'll take a picture of the setup, and then he writes it in his little notepad in the notebook in the phone, writes down what we discuss and the setup and what this does and where the pulley's got to go and how to set up a Z-rig and how to change a Z-rig to a 5-to-1 and so on and so forth. But he has that for his reference. And in the academy, I don't see much note-taking during the lectures. And they're not allowed to have their phones on the training grounds, but maybe we should be handing out notebooks or something to these recruits during the hands-on training so they can take notes during the hands-on training, or give them a time frame. All right, we've done this skill. You've performed the skill. We've talked about the skill. While we're hot washing the skill that we just did and reviewing it, because that's how it goes. You set up 4 stations in the morning. Everybody rotates through the stations in an hour, but there's always 10, 15 minutes after the skills are completed where you've hot washed the station, you reviewed what you did. We should emphasize taking notes during that time. Maybe allow them to have their phones to take notes if that's how they want to take notes, or hand out go buy notebooks for them and they can jot down notes. And if they're not taking notes, that's when the instructor says, hey, you should probably be writing this down so you can reference this in the future. Do you think that's a good idea? I mean, I don't know if the instructors want to allow the phones on the training grounds. I'm not a fan of the phones on the training grounds because it can be distracting. But if that's how the generations are taking notes now, it could be a benefit.
I would say no to the phones, but I agree with the note taking, and I don't see what the handouts are that's to the students that's handled on an administration side of things. However, I have noticed, at least in this last class that went through in the spring, they were taking more notes than I've seen in the past. I'm not sure if they brought their own notebooks or were told to do so or saw all sorts of different instruments, but at least when I go up and stand up there and do the presentations, I like to reiterate some points, some talking points and everything, or jot some notes on the whiteboard. I'm a big whiteboard fan. Everybody knows that about me. So I'll write my own things or add something to it. Or if I need to, you always have the instructors like, hey, when I tap my feet or stomp my feet, that's the point you need to write down or memorize because it's going to be on the test. Well, I'll kind of do that on the whiteboard and then put some points, bullet points under it just so that it helps stick. Or maybe it's a metaphor or some other way. I use it as a teaching component. So whatever I write on the whiteboard, you're writing in your notes, and it kind of gets them to follow the pace. And then next thing you know, they're kind of picking up their own notations. That kind of spawns from, man, I had this teacher in 6th grade. That's the earliest time I can remember learning that. He wanted us to learn how to take notes in class as he was speaking. So he would actually read the textbook ahead, prepare notes in a very systematic. I don't even know what the notation style is, but it's like where you have like a title. So there might be an A or Roman numeral one in next to it. And then you've had A, then the sub category would be 1, 2, 3. And if you had anything to add to, like, say, 2, it'd be 2, then little a. You know what I mean? So it's essentially like tabulations or indents.
It's like you're
He did
creating an
that for,
outline for an essay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's how he would run through the notes of what he was going to talk about the next day. So when he got in there, he would literally take his notes, and as we were going through the textbook, he would now write them on the chalkboard, and we were to copy that. So we started by repetition of copying notes in a certain style that matched what was going on in the literature that we were discussing in the class. And he slowly phased out him doing the notes, him taking the notes ahead of time, so that we phased in picking up on what to jot down. And that always stuck with me. So that's how I take notes. And going with that, really quick, you mentioned signal. So I just opened up my notes right here. Species, incapacities, gender, name, age, and location. I think it was incapacities were the
Incapacity is
ones.
the one I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I had to look that one up, but yeah, it's in my notes because that's what I still do. I take notes. Now, to add with the academy stuff and maybe even just our probation people, as they come in, I've slowly worked out what works best for me, and that's using one of the Write in the Rain little notebooks. I started with a little $2 single, I think it was like a $1 little Spyro that I got Dollar General or something like that, and I put it in my pants pocket on the side. But what I learned real quick is that you sweat a lot in your PPE, or you get drenched when you're in drill and all that stuff. So that notebook was no good. And somebody turned me on. I think it was my buddy Mike actually turned me on to Write in the Rain. I gave that a shot. That's what I carry every day. So I bought a 3-pack and it lasted a while, and I jot all my notes. The first page is essentially like a little quick pump chart, if you will. And there's some poundage forces, basic, what do you call them? It's like a cheat sheet. So
Friction
as I
losses and
go,
stuff like that.
yeah, pretty much, if anything from pumps to, I have a lot of stuff for trench and collapse, how much poundage per square foot things press down and nerd shit. But regardless, I put those in the first page, and then, all the next 100 pages are just notes through something that I learned, something I saw. Some of it is from some of the tech series or tech calls where we've had to do quick math, and I save those so that I can look back on them. But when I run out of space and I start a new notebook, that cheat sheet that's in the first page, I add right to the first page in the next notebook, and any additions that came along throughout the years. So it's kind of cool. It shows a little bit of an evolution of my learning, but that's what works for me. Pencil or pen and paper, pencil or pen, but definitely that Write in the Rain stuff, dude, it's sweat proof in your pocket.
Yeah.
Never have to worry about battery.
So you're hitting on the note taking for more of the cognitive part of the academy. They sit through the lectures and they're taking notes, which I know my learning ability is if I can skim through the book and take notes of the highlights and then listen to the lecture and take notes, and I'll do pretty well on the test. I feel like there's so much information in the manuals now that, and we're not going to get into whether the manuals are good or bad because the recruits need to pass a test. There's so much information in the manuals, and the tests are straight from the manuals, that the lecture is more of just the highlights of what they need to know, but those test questions are coming straight from the manual. So even sitting through the lecture and taking notes on the highlights, we've ran into problems where the recruits aren't passing tests, and we have to sit down and tell them, you need to read the text. Even though you might not, even though as instructors, we don't tell the students this until they're probably out of the academy. Some instructors, they voice their opinions about the manual in the recruit class, which is a whole nother issue. But the manual is the manual, and the test is a test, and they have to pass the test to go on through the academy. So they need to read the manual. They need to take notes while they're reading, which will help them pass a test. My thing is when they get on the training ground and we perform a skill, we show them the skill they want. You do the 5-step learning process, perform the skill, while you tell them what you're going to do. They tell you while you perform the skill, and then they perform the skill to mastery, and then you test them on it.
Mm-hmm.
They do that, and then the next day we go to repeat that for practice, and some recruits forget everything. It's like they went in a vapor lock. That's where I think the note taking on the training ground should take place. We should give them an opportunity to take notes on the training ground. I think that's where that's one of the parts where we fail on the training grounds, is not allowing the recruits to take notes. I mean, just think about when you go through the saw, that hour-long saw station. How much information are you giving those recruits? Probably more.
Minimum. Minimum is sticking, but you're giving them a lot.
You're giving them a lot, and they're probably getting more than they've ever heard about saws in their lifetime. It might be the first time they've looked at a small engine before, and they're just sitting there with the deer in the headlights looking at a small engine, and you're talking about the carburetor, the air intake, the choke, this, that, and the other thing, and they're not taking. Have you ever once seen someone with a pen and paper while you're at that saw station taking notes about stuff that you're telling them?
No.
I haven't. Or you go to the vertical ventilation station and you go over the cut sequence of how you want to do, how the cut sequence should be done, and you show them that, they perform it, and then the next day when they go to practice it again, they forget the cut sequence. And I think if they took notes while you're teaching them how to do the cut sequence or any skill that we're doing, I think they would perform a little bit better the next day and perform better when they get out of the academy. Just the physical aspect of taking notes. I think that's where we are right now with the generation of firemen that are coming in that we're bringing in at this point, because they don't have that background. So we have to bridge that gap.
Another kind of tough part with those skills, with or without note taking, is time. Even if you have a group of 20 people and you've now split it up to let's make it an even number, 4 stations, so 5 people per station. How many times can you rotate through before lunch, right? Everybody's got to hit all 4 stations before lunch type of thing. So you're limited to 3 hours. You start breaking this down. It's like by the time you start that and then end it for the next group to roll through, plus water breaks and all that other stuff, bathroom, there's really no time to run through. So you're kind of rushed in doling out everything that was on, the schedule for that 45-minute block or so, but none of it's really sticking because you have not been able to break it down far enough or you have a rushed example. The saws is a great one to focus on. And I know for those listening, it seems like we keep bringing up saws, not just because we're a truck company or we currently belong to a truck company. It's something that we do see that is, for us, it seems basic, but it really isn't. And there's a lot that can go wrong, and you need a lot of time and practice with these things just to get to a novice level.
I could even make that argument for pump operators week. I mean, how much math goes into that pump operators week before they even touch a pump? Man, I've kind of walked in on some of our pump operator instructors, and the heads are spinning with how much math is on the board. And I enjoy math, but I don't know. Pump week's a tough week for a lot of people with the math.
It was tough for me. I had a great instructor though. He's actually battalion chief to the north here, where we work. He was the pump instructor for the week that I was in the academy. And I think, what was that, 5 days? I might be wrong. Might be 4 days total, but 3 we were straight up in the classroom. 4th, and then rolling into the following week, we were just out there pumping. But but he was really good at that math.
I mean, note taking. I mean, we could beat up note taking all night. The the other thing is just, do you think there should be prerequisites somehow to, even before you get in the academy? Maybe. I mean, it's tough
Give me
because the civil service, you take a test, you get on the job, and then that's it. But there's the way we've been hiring and the way a lot of departments have been hiring. It's not like in the past where when I was hired, you would get hired and you might not go to the academy for 3, 4, 5 months. And you would ride the load and get a little bit on the job training and then get sent to the academy. Now it's you're getting hired, and then 2 weeks later you're starting the academy, and I think that's kind of the national standard. A lot of places for most mid-sized to major departments. I mean, some of the smaller departments that they're even in the state we live, they're going to hire, they're going to put you on a load, and then when the academy rolls around, when the state academy has an academy class, they'll send you to that academy. So some of those guys are coming in with a little bit on the job training. I mean,
Yeah, and
even
sometimes it's good and sometimes it's detrimental.
yeah, I mean, even like when we have volunteers come in and they're hardcore volunteers, and God bless them. But some of the volunteer companies that we get them from, it's like it's not really the best way to do things, and now we got to break the mold to where I almost rather take someone that's never been a volunteer. Sometimes we get we get volunteers that get on the job and they're just all about the fire service and they want to know everything. But then we get some volunteers that are the hardcore volunteers. Their volunteer department is more important than the paid department, and they'd rather just get through the academy so they can be on the job, be a paid fireman, but their volunteer department is more important to them. And I don't know how to not see the light, because volunteering is still very important. There are communities that cannot survive without a volunteer fire department. But your job is puts food on your table, it pays your health care. If you get hurt volunteering, all that goes away.
It's the same thing for the volunteers who are not also a career guy. I mean, they work 40 hours plus, and then in their spare time, they're also volunteering. That's a tough sequence of event for a week too. But we see a lot of the guys that come from, I don't want to just straight up say blue collar work, but guys that do have on the job experience at another job gives them that primer for coming to places like ours. And even in the volunteer service as well. But you got a guy that works construction or how, like, let's say masonry. What if you're constantly working with your hands? How many different power tools are you working with at the same time? You have a foundation for basic mechanics and, to a degree, certain engineering skills, whether you recognize it or not. You don't need to just have a BS in engineering, but leveling out concrete and understanding those strengths, and the forces they're applying to that as it cures. Those are important skill sets. So that when you come into a place, even if it's volunteer world or career world, you already got the prerequisites built in. If we make prerequisites, would that shoot us in the foot? Maybe there's somebody out there that's never had the opportunity to get those primers, and then they turn out to be, a rock star in the fire service, and we miss that.
Yeah, I'm not
Because we
saying
turn them off.
almost like an aptitude test.
That would be a better way of putting it, yeah. But not like a checklist. Like your CV doesn't meet what we're requiring.
Yeah,
An aptitude test could be good, yeah.
I mean, the academies are what they are. I think some academies do a better job than others. Even ours, I think ours has our faults at some places. I think we do a very good job, but I think we could do a better job in some other areas. The big thing I want to talk about tonight is not so much the academies, is they graduate the academy and now they're on the load. Now
Now what?
now what do we do with them? In our department, we developed a Proby book. And we're on our like fourth iteration at this point now. And all that Proby book is the front section, and I'll tell you right now, when I was the training officer, I stole the idea from another department, kind of put our own spin on it. Actually, I stole it from a multitude of departments and just put our own spin on it. The front section is quizzes, more cognitive learning, history, ICS, apparatus check sheets, responses, SOGs, stuff like that. It's more of them just to make sure if they have downtime that they're in the books learning and trying to retain the information that was told to them or maybe learn something new. Even one of the parts is just knowing who works in the firehouse. You know, we want to who are the 5 commissioners, who's the HR person, who's the district secretary, and if you don't know them, go introduce yourself type of thing, and this is who they are. The second half of the book is skill sheets, and they're all JPRs. And the first iteration was, all right, make sure all it was all right, you're out of the academy. Let's just make sure you've retained it and you do it once and you're good to go. The iteration we're on now is they want our probationary firemen to perform these tasks at least twice, I believe.
It's currently twice. Yeah. It can be more as long as there's a start date and an end date.
But they want to perform each skill twice.
Yeah. Reflecting them multiple times if happened.
Which I agree and disagree. If they need multiple times, the original book was like, all right, you started on this, you didn't pass it, so we're not going to sign you off on it. It was never a one-shot deal. It was, we're only going to sign you off on the skill if you did it correctly. Now it's
or on your final pass.
Right, before probation ended. Now it's they want you, even if you perform it like a rock star in the first time, you still got to do it again. It is what it is. If they want us to make our probationary firemen do it multiple times, then, you know, we'll do it multiple times. It's more sets and reps for us to doing as well,
which is a huge benefit.
I agree.
You know, if we got a lot going on, okay, I can see how they can take away from the day. But if we don't, let's say we have one of those days where the training on the calendar is a free day, company level, you make it what you want. You know, it's kind of cool to have a bunch of these newer probationary members to pull from and be like, hey, come here a second. What do you got in your book? What do you need signed off? All right, let's go take 2 hours and hit that.
So you get a probationary fireman assigned to your rig or our company day one. What are you doing with him as the fireman?
As soon as he gets there, I kind of kick off that initial meet and greet and setting expectations with them. So it may not be their first day at work, but it may be the first day at our company. Sometimes those things are the same, but a lot of times it's their first time at our company. And we do have a little bit of different expectations around the house and on our crew. I like to set that off right off the bat. So you kind of stern at first, like we said, very, very stern, get that cup of coffee or get that coffee pot started, but go through the rules of what you expect them to be doing coming into the shift and every shift. Then slowly dial back, relaxing conversation a little bit to get to know them, make sure that they ask questions. Maybe they already have questions. We have a book at our station. For those of you listening, that's our truck company kind of has like its own manual. So there's certain things that are specific to our rig, and then there's certain equipment on our rig that the other rigs do not have. So it's kind of a all-in-one book of what to do if you got questions. We like them to get familiar with everything that's in that book. So it gives them, if they have downtime, go take another chapter out of that book, take another chapter. Yes, it's on top of their probationary book, but it's good to know everything. Within those first 1 to 2 days, possibly into the third, small nuances that are on our rig that are different from everything else, such as how our hand lines, we are on a quint. So I know, let's not pull hand lines if we don't have to, but they are different from everything else in our department. So I like to go over the hand lines, then specific features of our rig. Because if we get that one call right off the bat on their first day, I want them prepared. Sometimes the boss kicks this stuff off, but I like to take that initiative. So it takes a little bit off the boss's plate. He's got a lot of boss stuff to do, but it also gives me something to fill out my day as well.
I agree. One thing I like to do I like to let my fireman take care of the probie for the first couple hours. I don't even really talk to him. I'll welcome him, say, hey, how you doing? And, get a cup of coffee and then kind of leave him alone with the fireman. But one thing, a retired company officer from the city next door to us, is one thing that this company officer told me is what he likes to do is after first couple hours, him getting acclimated to the firehouse, is he sits down with a probationary fireman and he lays out the expectations for him, for the probationary fireman. And this goes back to what you said about respect, is then you ask him as a probationary fireman what he expects to get out of you as a company officer and being assigned to your company, is showing respect to the probationary fireman. After he
Interesting.
gives you, and it's almost, it takes him by surprise, but it puts him on the spot, and it kind of lets him, think about it. It says, this is what I want to learn. This is what I'm hoping to get out of it, so on and so forth. It's like, okay, if you're expecting to get this out of me, now as a company officer, I'm expecting this out of you. And then you lay your expectations on him. He's had his chance to give you his expectations of you. Now as a company officer, you're laying it out for him. And I feel like that works pretty well with some of the younger firemen that we're getting in. Because I don't think they've ever been asked, what are you expecting to get out of being over here? And I think that's a good way of going about it with some of these guys.
The only time I could think of somebody asking me a question like that was like maybe the first 2 years around end of the year. They used to do kind of like a performance review type of thing. It was unofficial, but the bosses out of the station I was at, they'd sit down with you. And I remember that question came up twice. What do you expect from me? Here's what I hope to expect from you. Kind of gets you sets that tone right off the bat of having a buy-in. I don't know if buy-in's the right word, but definitely a give and take relationship instead of somebody feeling like they're just a tag along.
Yeah, exactly. What I've noticed though is I think sometimes after a couple of weeks, the probationary firemen get comfortable. I see it more when they're going through rotations, and I might be on the last part of the rotation. They've already had time at some other companies. They're on their last couple weeks of their probationary period, and they're getting comfortable, and they're kind of not doing what probationary firemen should be doing. I think that's where that whole expectation conversation needs to take place, especially when they're still coming into your company. You got to have that conversation.
Do you ever have a conversation with the other bosses from the other stations about the same particular probationary member? So when you do, if you're on the final rotation, you're seeing some things that maybe you want to tweak or you might have questions about. Do you kind of compare notes with the other bosses?
To a point, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes we just, we see them on jobs. We'll see them at multi-company training. So we have kind of an idea of what this Probie is bringing to the table. The other issue is, and I have a problem with it. I think everybody's got a problem with it, is not giving everybody a clean slate when they get to you. And it's something I've been trying to work on, where someone might come in and you've heard stories about them. You've heard this guy might be a rock star, or this guy might be a mutt, and they come in as a rock star, so you feel that you kind of can give them some slack, but then you give them slack and it's like, well, this guy really isn't a rock star. We got to work on him a little bit more. Or he is a rock star and he still it's the rock star needs to have the reins pulled back on him a little bit to humble him a little bit more because he's still on probation. He needs to get humbled. The other end of the spectrum is he might be a mutt, and you might think he's I'm going to swear he's a shitbag, and you write him off, and it's not fair to him. I've been working on it. I'm not always the best at it. It's something I've been trying to improve upon. I think I deal with humbling the rock star a little bit more. I think I do a good job with that. But sometimes when a guy comes in he everybody complains about him. He's this, that, and the other thing. And now I'm like, I don't even want to deal with this guy. We'll do the minimum training, which isn't fair to me, which isn't fair to him. He's got to perform. I got to rely on him just as much as he's got to rely on me. It's something that's a constant improvement I have to do. The other thing is that expectation conversation that I have with a probationary fireman, I also have that with the guys on the rig before the probie comes. We talk about the expectations that we have for the probie, and we kind of brainstorm what expectations he's going to have of us. And I try to lay out the groundwork for the two senior guys on my rig. This is what I'm expecting you guys to do for our probationary fireman when he comes here. And I also ask them, what are you expecting me to do to help you succeed in getting our probationary fireman up to where he needs to be? So that expectation conversation happens not only with the probationary fireman, but beforehand with the two senior guys that are on the rig. And we have 3 probies on my group right now. So I've had that conversation 3 different times with our senior guys. And it's just a reminder, constantly reminding them. They do, and they're not company officers. They are instructors. Sometimes I got to remind them, just as I got to remind myself, we got to give everybody a clean slate and come in and teach them the way we want them to operate on our rig, and not give them the benefit of the doubt. Let them. I take this from Jocko. He said this in a podcast long ago. He always has 0 expectations. Everybody starts off at a 0. Doesn't matter what he's heard about him before. The guy might be a shitbag. Guy might be a rock star. He's coming in at a 0, and if he's at a 0, then his expectations can either go up or they can go down, but it's not going to be on his fault. And I try to make that my mantra for when I have probationary firemen on my group. I'm not going to be the reason that probie fails, or I try not to be the reason.
So you kind of lead me to got to ask a question here. Other than asking your senior men to give the new guy benefit of the doubt, well, give me a quick list or 1 or 2 bullet points of something else that you kind of ask of them.
Ask my senior guys?
Yeah, to usher in this new person. What else do you have on the list for them that you expect them to do?
I expect my senior guys to be out there. I know they know the rig. They don't need the truck check sheet to go through the rig. But I ask them to make sure that they're out there with the probie every morning doing the truck check with the probie. And this had to get reminded a couple months ago when they weren't out there. They got kind of lax, and we caught the probie kind of not doing the truck check the way it should have been done. So the senior guy went out there and became a babysitter for 2 or 3 shifts, going through the rig with a fine-tooth comb, because that wasn't going to fly. So I expect them to be, they're going to have to get out of their morning routine a little bit that they're so used to being in, and being out there with a probie doing the truck checks. They're kind of the eyes and ears for me. So I want them to make sure that the jobs are getting done that's supposed to be probationary fireman duties, taking the trash out, making sure the dishes are washed, so on and so forth. And if that's not getting done, they're going to do it and then they're going to let the probie know that, hey, this is what your job. We're going to do it with you, but you should be the one that's starting the process. We might
And
not get
and
up
for
from the
how long?
table. That's until they're done. And
Okay.
I mean, they're the junior guy. That's how the fire service works. And one thing I still, I'll get up and clean dishes, but I expect, I'll mop a floor. But if I start mopping a floor, I expect a probie to grab the mop from me and start mopping the floor.
Oh man, you're one of your other guys, man. When he first started here, he was afraid to see you with a mop or uh the brush to wash the truck. He would hop twice just to get there and make sure that you were not picking up any of his tasks for him.
I mean,
Man,
I
he
don't
was
mind
so nervous.
well, I don't mind doing it.
He didn't. I don't know how that started. It was maybe one of us said something to him, but man, if he saw you, he felt like he was failing somewhere along the way.
I mean, but that's, when coming up through the fire service, when I was hired, I mean, I was hired and I was the youngest at the time. I was the youngest hire here, and I was the youngest by some of the guys were 20 years my senior, and they weren't even company officers. My senior guy, before I got promoted, was one of my father's best friends. I grew up with his son, and now I'm working on the rig with him, and then I got promoted, and now I'm his boss. It was kind of a weird dichotomy to go through. Having that senior guy like that, growing up with him, he was Mr. So and so my entire life. And even when I got on the job, I was still calling him Mr. So and so. And he's
Yeah.
like, dude, you got to call me by my first name. We're coworkers now. I'm not that. I'm like, it's however many, 20 years of habit that I had to break by calling him Mr.
Hmm.
So and so. Now I'm calling him by his first name, and it was kind of a mind off for a while, but you get over it. But having that senior, he was a true senior guy. Having him put me in my place a couple times, that doesn't happen as much anymore. We don't have the true senior guys, at least in our firehouse. We talked about it with Mike on a previous podcast about even in the city he works in, which is, I think they're up to 475 guys on the job, maybe 500 guys on the job. Some of the senior guys there have 10 years on the job. They're at the same position we are in our department, and we have 84 guys on the job, 80 something.
Somewhere around I think 81 at the moment. But
But I mean,
yeah,
we
he
we
was just
don't.
saying within his first year, you might end up so you're either just at the end of your probationary period or you're just into your, finished up your first year and already there's somebody under you that you may also be expected to take under your wing, not just be below, just one step above it, that new person on the pecking order.
You might have multiple guys underneath you.
You might have multiple guys, yeah.
I mean, my group alone, there's guys that are on the job that have 2 years on the job, and there's 3 probies underneath them already. I mean, granted, they're on different companies, but there's a time with overtime. And I just worked a shift the other day where it's me as a company officer, my driver with 7, 8 years on, and then we have 2 probies sitting in the back. And now I have to rely on a 7-year fireman as the chauffeur to keep an eye on someone who's operating in the OV position, which is usually a more senior fireman position because you're operating alone at house fires, to keep an eye on him because I'm inside with the can position, which is usually relegated to the probie. But now I got 2 probies on the rig, and what do you do? And that goes back to when they get on when I get a shift like that, I got to make sure that probationary fireman that's sitting in an OV position has the expectations of that position. We can, they have to be trained to what they need to do. They have to know the tools that they have to carry, and I have to rely on that 7-year senior fireman to reiterate and make sure that those expectations are met. Especially that there was one day where the probationary fireman that was working on my rig, it was his first day ever working on our rig. He's never worked on our rig before, not even through his probationary rotation. It's just the way his group managed it. He never rotated onto our truck company. And when he showed up, he's like, I've never worked on this rig before. And I rotated him out to the cam position because the probie that was assigned to our company has been there for a couple months, and I put him in the OV. But still, and I still have a probationary fireman in the OV position. It's a good problem to have, but it's a tough problem to solve.
Yeah, and I don't know what that's like from a company officer standpoint, but from another member on that crew, when we get an overtime person, we have a probationary member currently on our crew, and with the guy that's just he's senior than me, that's also on my crew. He takes time off to go camping and all that. So we have a position that's been rotating through with all sorts of people, but ultimately during the summertime and everybody's out boating, we get a lot of probationary members. So the other day I had 2 probationary members and then my boss, and boss has boss stuff to do, but if he needs a lull or he needs a time, I kind of just, hey boss, you need a break. If you got a break for your thing, I'm going to go work with these guys on whatever the hell they need in their book or something specific that I want to do. Gives me something extra to do to fill out the day to meet what their requirements are. But it's kind of fun at the same time because I get to see what the other companies are working on with these people, or these other groups are working on with their people. And then they come here, I kind of get to see their notes. Maybe I'll shoot a text or an email over to one of the other instructors. Hey, I noticed you signed off, or your initials are in this book here, here, and here. Where are we at? And what do you want me to do for your person? Because ultimately, we're borrowing them for a day. Doesn't mean it's got to do it. We got to do everything my way or our crew's way. I want to make sure I'm improving upon what's best for his company officer, his group's battalion chief, or whatever. So I like to double check. Hey, am I on target if I do this with your guy today? Yeah, man, absolutely. Take that. I'm glad you said something. Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool, sweet. That gives us something to work on. The downside to having a lot of probation members roll through is that I get to challenge them. I don't have a lot of people challenging me other than the fact of keeping up on the more, man, I hate using the term basic skills, but some days I want to be the person learning, not just teaching. And with a lot of probationary people, that's the downside, but it's not always a problem. But it does give us something to fill out the day. Gives us at least the valleys in the day,
So you mentioned signing off on our Probie books. One thing I do, and I do it out of respect for the company officers, that like if we have a Probie that comes on overtime onto my group, or if I'm working overtime on another group with probationary firemen, out of respect, I will not sign that Probie book off for that officer unless, and there's officers that do this, they'll email me or text me and say, hey, we've been working on such and such skill with our Probie. Can you run him through it? And if he succeeds at it, go ahead, sign him off. And I'll be like, yeah, no problem. I'll do it for you. But out of respect for the company officer, if we go out and do training and we do a Probie skill, I won't sign them off because I don't know what he's done with the officer. If that officer hasn't told me that he wants them signed off, I won't sign them off. And just because I don't know if he's seeing something else or if he's teaching them something else that he wants to do, to me, that's more of a respect thing. It's happened to me where I was working with a probationary fireman on my group, and he was struggling with a skill, and I was working with him. He works an overtime shift, and he comes back, and that skill signed off, and I'm like, all right, not that I don't trust the other officer, but it's like I'd rather see that skill done for me, especially a truck company skill.
Yeah,
throwing
you
lat.
question if the improvement really was there.
Right. It, I mean, the standard's the standard, but I think every company officer has their own standard to what they want to see done. And I'm not saying my standard is higher, but everybody has their own. And I'd want to make sure it was done to where I would like to see it done. And now that it's signed off, it's not that I can't go back and say, "Hey, let's throw ladders again." And it's not where I'm not going to scribble out the signature and we're going to go back and you're not going to get the skill signed off because you might have had a lucky Saturday and got it done.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's more of the trust but verify type thing. And uh, some company officers don't want their skills signed off by anybody but the company officer that's assigned to them. Me, I'll shoot an email to, if my Probies working overtime, I'll say, "Hey, we've been working on this. Either don't sign them off on this skill because I'm working with them on it, or if it's a pump skill and you're pulling hand lines or whatever, and he's working with a good engine boss. Hey, if you want to pull hand lines with him and sign him off on that skill, go have at it. But if we're forcing doors, throwing ladders, or doing searches, especially on the truck company, I want to make sure that he's doing it the way that I want him to perform with me because he's on my group. And our department, we have SOGs, but like every other department, every group has a little bit of nuances in how they operate. And with our other truck boss, we're on the same page, and we just want to make sure that they're doing the way that we operate on the fire ground when our group gets a fire. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that's right, wrong, but I more or less I think it's respect to the company officer that he's assigned to, that you're not signing off skills that they've been working on with.
to add with this too, we also have it's slowly evolved into our probationary books, at least for the JPR section. So we have an inventory system at our department that also includes uh, drill reports for the shift, for an individual, however you want to fill those out. And when it generates that drill report, there's a number, a unique identifying number. So if we go out back and we're doing a specific, let's say Probie skill A with the entire company, then a drill report gets made for all the members on the company that were doing that drill, and then I will put in the notation portion inside of that drill report, everything specific that we were working on. And then in the Probie book, if you choose to sign off either the beginning or the final sign off, each time you do each iteration, you have to include that drill report number. So there's a place to go reference everybody else that was there. So if you ever, like you said, trust but verify, maybe you just got to verify. You can talk to those members. You can read through the narrative. If the comment section in the probationary book is not a good enough indicator of the progress being made. So I like to always check with the company officer that they originate from, because maybe we're borrowing them, they're on overtime, or if they're just swapped from another group. Another crew. For instance, we had, oh man, I must say this is like 2 shifts ago. We have a probationary member that's assigned to an engine at the moment. He's doing his engine time, and they were chiseling away at the book for the last couple months, and it came down to ventilation. So they wanted the probationary member to go up on the roof, do some saw work, go on some flat roofs, do all this stuff. Well, apparently they have done this once. They wanted to get a second set of eyes, so they called over. I picked up and they're like, "Hey, can you meet us over at the training grounds? We want to do X, Y, and Z with ventilation for this member. He has not had truck time yet." Yeah, no problem. What they were looking for was that second set of eyes to see if I was seeing what they were seeing, so that they can continue or really change their entire program on how they were teaching. The certain individual was kind of having a struggle, so it was nice for them to include me in it. I felt, that, yeah, man, you're asking a favor, no problem, I'll give you a favor. No, that's awesome. I'd love to help, but at the same time, they wanted to make sure they weren't seeing something that they weren't. So it's kind of it was a cool little different nuance.
So, what do you think about sending when should our probies being sent? And when I say higher education, I'm not talking college. Higher education being more the technical classes that are offered in the fire service. To me, they should be concentrating on the basics and completing that probationary handbook before they even think about taking other classes. Because one thing we did in our department is it used to be you used to get on the job and you would drive you would start driving day one, and you could be driving right out of the academy. And one thing we did was we changed it to where you had to have a year on. You couldn't start driver training until you were off probation, because we wanted you to be in that back seat, learning to be a fireman, learning the skills, watching the company officer, watching the senior members, see how they operate, and concentrate on being a fireman. What I find sometimes, and it's not a bad thing, is that some firemen just have that urge to learn more and more stuff, and they want to get into the more technical parts of firefighting, rope rescue, swift water rescue, trench building collapse. But are we sending our probies to these classes a little too early? Then, hey, if you want to go to this engine company class and pull lines all day, have at it. If you want to go to this truck company class at this conference, that's cool. But let's hold off on the other stuff before you get your probationary period done, and make sure your skills are where they need to be, to the standard of a probationary fireman, where they should be. What are your thoughts? I get it. We need they could be called upon that day as a probationary fireman to go on rope and do a job. But at the same time, should they be concentrating on, like you said, the basics before they get into that stuff?
My opinion is yes. I would agree with that. They should be working on building the foundations of being a firefighter before going on to the other stuff. Everybody must be a firefighter across the board. Doesn't matter what kind of rig you work on, what department you're at, career volunteer, your probationary time, and I would extend that into possibly the next year. You should be focused on being a firefighter. Some places choose to use that as a reward system, that if you are doing well, here's your kind of like your token of appreciation, or you've earned this, and start allowing them to go on, outside training, if you will, or state training to a small degree, so our lower awareness levels for the tech rescue type, roles, or maybe even the next one up for us would be like an operations thing, going right into the rope world and trying to shoot all the way up to the tech level now. I don't think that's an appropriate course for a newer member that really has not solidified their base here. I mean, even the guys that got 5 to 10 years, it's not like they know everything either and they're good to go. But sometimes you need to break up the what could be perceived as monotony, so let them go experience a little bit of rope stuff, let them experience, maybe it reinvigorates them, gets them out of a plateau if they're in it. But for a probationary member to be so focused on something that's so far away, and yet they have not worked on, then they haven't solidified it being, the backstep firefighter, I don't think that that's an appropriate course of action. Now, just because that's what I believe doesn't mean it's what's happening. And we see that now. We got a lot of probationary members going out. For us, that would be RTB they already have RTB, a rope tech, rope operations level, and above. Some of the swift water, we do practice and use those disciplines at work. So there's sort of wiggle room for allowance, but to see all of our probationary people, 3-4 months out of the academy, putting in for classes and getting them, I don't know if you should be creating vacancies like that where they need to be learning.
It's not a bad thing that they want to go out and take more education classes and get better at the profession. The other thing I will say is that there's a lot of, at least in our job, and when I say our job, our department, there's a lot of high caliber technical rescue guys where our probationary firemen can get in-house training and get to a certain level where they can still perform the job. They go to those classes just to get the certificate that says, yeah, I'm a rope operations level, or they get a certificate that says, yeah, I'm a technician level. But they're we can we can train them in house with our company drills to do just as good as a job, if not better than what they get at those state classes that they offer. But that's on the job training. That's training with your company and training how we're doing it in the department. At the same time, like you said, you're taking them off the rig and sending them to a class for 4 days. Now they've lost, as
Two
much as
shifts.
two shifts, if their shifts fall in those 2 days of in the firehouse, learning basics and learning, completing their Probie book and doing what they need to do as a probationary fireman. We've lost 2 shifts out of their probationary period. And I don't, like, I agree with you. I don't think they should be sending probationary firemen to these technical classes. Said if they want to go to a conference and pull hand lines for a day, have at it. They want to go to a conference and do search drills and cut roofs and learn from some of the best around. That's cool too. But what I'm afraid of happening, I know what you're going to say, and what I'm afraid of happening is when you get into these technical rescue classes, and it's like I said, it's not a problem. What it could become a problem is when they get into the technical rescue classes, and then that's all they care about, and then that's all they want to do every day. Hey, let's train on the ropes. Let's train on, let's take the boat out. Let's do whatever with the swift water equipment. Let's rig up this elaborate rope system that we're probably never going to use. And they get so infatuated with the technical rescue part of the job that they start forgetting and losing the skills that we need them to have as probationary firemen, because they're so infatuated with a small minutia of the job that you might get one call a year on.
And I love what you said at the beginning there was we got enough people where we can do some small little trainings in the back of the bay or at the group level in your department, okay, where we can get the gist of it down. I like to use that, or at least this is what I've been trialing myself, is using technical rescue, specifically ropes, as kind of a teaser, but also a reward token. Not that I'm trying to manipulate the thing, but if we do 3 days of straight, let's say just Probie work constantly, that can get exhausting. It can sort of get, all right, enough already. Same thing over and over again. To break that up, all right, you know what? Today, to hell with it. Let's go grab the 2 rope bags. I want to show you something. And it doesn't matter who's on the company. Maybe it's 2 probationary guys with me, or maybe it's, another veteran dude that's working overtime. It's like, hey man, let's go out and just monkey around. And we'll toy around, give them a little teaser, let them feel what it's like being on rope again, because they probably only did it in RTB in the academy, and that was it. Let them get a little bit of excitement. Okay, well, you can get more of that later. Back to Probie work, and slowly keep giving them these little injections of excitement, you know what I mean? And use it to kind of motivate them. They feel like they're part of the crew. Also, you're giving them a little bit hands-on with the rope equipment that we have. Not that we need them doing tech rescue, going over the side of a bridge 400 feet down. They're not going to be doing that. But someday they will be asked, and maybe inside of a year, hey, I need you to go get the clutch or the MPD, go start me a main, a belay, whatever. They need to know what that equipment is, because they are on that crew that's going to have to grab a bag, bring equipment, maybe even to the level that they got to put something together. Everything's obviously double checked, and we triple check some of the newer people's work, but you're introducing the equipment at the same time as you're giving them kind of like a little, token of motivation.
Yeah, I do agree that the rope work kind of breaks up the monotony of working on that Probie book. Especially, it seemed like this year, the way the weather was, and our rig was out of service for, what did we get it back in April?
Dude, did that screw us or what?
Yeah, I mean, so we had our guys got out of the academy mid-November, and our rig went out of service shortly after that. So we didn't have our truck until April. So
Yeah.
we lost 5 months of having our truck company. Granted, it was in the winter, and some of the stuff the vertical ventilation is tough to do in the snow. But with the winter we had this year, it was pretty mild. So a lot of the outside truck work in the Proby book got pushed off until our truck got back, and then it was like a mad scramble to get some of these guys signed off on the truck skills in the Proby book, because our other truck company is a tower ladder, and the way the running procedure is, we don't really like to assign probies on our groups to that apparatus for various amount of reasons. So they rotate between the two engines and our truck company. But for those first 5 months, anybody that was assigned to our company wasn't riding on a truck; they were riding on an engine, and it was very difficult to get some of those truck skills signed off. That you had to use the aerial. There's truck skills that we have in that book that are specific to the aerial, and just the pain. And yes, and it's an excuse, but we pack all the stuff that's on our truck company that has 180 cubic feet of compartment space into an engine that has maybe 130 cubic feet of compartment space, and some of the stuff is laying on the truck bay floor, and if we need it, we scoop it up and put it in the rig. So, like I said, it's an excuse, but it was almost a pain for some of those skills to be done, because just getting the stuff, if just to take the stuff off the rig and set up a training evolution, and if we got a call, it was going to delay our response so much that it was like, all right, we'll work on this another day. And then it was the rig's coming back in a week or so. Well, then it turned into a month or so, and then it turned into, well, it's not coming back for another 2 months. And then when it came back, it was a mad dash to get these truck skills done. And that was across the groups. We probably could have done a better job as company officers and senior firemen making the job, making it happen with the equipment that we had on hand that during those 5 months that our rig was out of service.
Yeah, I mean, I can 100% testify to that and take responsibility for the failure on my part. So not only do we have some probation members during this time frame, we also got the just after 1 year guy. So for our department, when you get off probation at 1 year, now that second year, you got to get cleared on all the rigs as an operator. That's a lot to go through. So we had not only probationary people coming through looking for our company, looking for truck time. We also had operators looking for truck time. And this one poor kid that's with us, he came over here, sat up here for so long, and all he rode was an engine for the first year and a half. And he's in his trying to get signed off on our rig, and it's just not there. And the other one was in and out of service as well, but he did not get enough truck time. And then as soon as we got the truck back, he was dumped to rotated back out. It's like, oh man. And I felt so bad because everything we had planned worked for him. He was excited. I think he was losing interest as we were going along. And unfortunately, this is why I can take responsibility for part of this stuff. A lot of the day, instead of doing truck-based skills, we either defaulted to like basic rope stuff and a ton of admin work. And by admin work, that could be anything from running around the district, resupplying for the station, just non-firematic stuff all day long. And it did take up a lot of the day, but we chose to take care of all those things rather than trying to ad hoc some sort of truck company based training. I mean, we could have easily just pulled some old ladders out of storage or whatever and did something, I mean, just because we didn't have that big old truck with a aerial ladder on the back doesn't mean we can't do ventilation. We just didn't. But this kid he was there specifically to operate that rig, and that rig wasn't there.
Yeah, I
So
mean, don't get
I
me
think he got
wrong.
bored.
I mean, we got a lot of the. I mean, we have a force entry door in our firehouse, so those skills were completed. Our search skills were completed because those were done in our basement training facility that we built out with an apartment for a search apartment. So we had a couple of truck skills done. I just, like I said, it's a lame excuse, but a lot of the outside truck company functions kind of fell on the back burner, and it was just, well, we're on an engine. It's the winter time. We'll do it when we get around to it. And now I think the pressure is on all the bosses, and because you look at all the Proby books, a lot of them got signed off in a decent amount of time to spare, but there are still a couple lingering out there, and it's like the training officer came to me and was like, "Why isn't this signed off?" I said, "Well, you got to understand, we didn't have a truck for 5 months, and that was his first
Yeah.
rotation through probation was assigned to the truck company that wasn't a truck company; it was an engine at the time." That's something maybe as officers that we should probably do a better job looking at, especially if trucks are in and out of service. Hey, if the truck company's going out of service for an extended period of time for whatever reason, let's adjust the probationary rotation schedule. Or I understand it's not the best situation, but let's throw him on the tower ladder for a couple shifts and he can get some of that truck company stuff done. The engine, we have enough reserve engines. The engines work always seems to go quicker than the truck company stuff. Just because the travel time we have to go to the facility, depending on which facility we're going to, either the county or the in-house one, our in-house facility at a different station. There's ground ladder work stuff we can do at our firehouse. There's force entry work. Obviously, we can do at our firehouse. I think all the guys that work out of our firehouse are really good at force entry just because we have the door right where it is. But I say, it's a
Well,
lame excuse.
in that same time frame, our door was being borrowed as well.
That's another good point. That
So we
is a
didn't
very,
have a door.
yeah. Yeah, because the academy was going on, and then it didn't get delivered back. It sat at another firehouse for what, a month and a half after the academy was finished.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think it may have been borrowed again to that school program for a week
yeah, yeah,
right after that. And then it made its way back here. We're glad to have it back.
yeah. We are
But
glad
it
to have
was
it back.
like we were limited on what we're used to using. I'll put it that way. And we could have gotten a little bit more creative.
Yeah,
In
and
the
like I
end,
said,
still good because it challenged us. We were able to take these notes, go from there.
it's a poor excuse, but learning curve. And it's one of those things that now, if it happens again, we're not going to make that same mistake. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, type of thing.
All right, so that's all Proby skills, the book, JPRs. We got a lot of JPRs because now OSHA's kind of referencing them as well. So we have to have all these documentations and I believe that's what the MTO and some of the other training officers around the other districts were mentioning. Like, hey, we're kind of making this book bigger and bigger because we have to show our work on this, on all this stuff. So regardless, that's training. And then there's training, which is how to be a firefighter in the firehouse. Tell me, can you expand on that a little bit? We mentioned the expectations, and that's kind of, okay, here's the sequence of coming in to work in the morning, what we expect of you. But what else are we teaching these people?
Well, I mean, there's the academy training, and then there's real life fireground operations. I feel like that's a lot of. It's not reprogramming, but it's like, okay, you've passed the national standard, the JPRs that you need to get in New York State we call it the 229. And that goes back to the original amount of hours you had that the academies were. There were 229 hours. Now it's called the 229 standard. I think they're up to like 500 hours of training now, whatever 14 weeks of training is. But they've passed those national standards for the pro board, and New York State has gone to, they used to have a separate skill sheets for New York State, and then they would have separate skill sheets for pro board. Thankfully, New York State got smart, and now it's just the New York State skill sheets are pro board skill sheets. So if you pass the New York State skill sheets, you're pro board certified. Whoop de doo. But those are, it's a national standard. That's not, and those are, guys sitting behind a desk making skill sheets and how we think we should operate safely and effectively. But it's not always the most efficient way to operate on a fire ground. So it's a little bit of reprogramming we have to do, but it's more of showing, all right, yeah, that is the way you throw a ladder in the academy, and that's we foot it here, you do this, this many rungs above the building, or however what you teach them in the academy. Then there's some, I hate to call them tricks of the trade. It's just the trade, and you develop your trade over time, just like any other trade. You might teach your 8-year-old son how to swing a hammer, but after time, he might develop his own little skill set of how to more efficiently swing a hammer the way he wants to swing a hammer. And that's what you have to try to do with your probationary fireman once they get out of the academy, is give him or give them tips on how to improve their technique, and say, all right, that works on a training building on a concrete slab with no siding or no gutters in the way. This is how it's going to work, or this is how it's going to operate on a house that has aluminum siding sticking out, and then you have the eaves that hang over with a gutter, however many inches or even feet over the side of the house. So you can't do that firefighter one single fireman raise where you butt it up against the building and either raise it on the beams or hand over hand on the rungs and then raise it up because there's a gutter in the way. Or when you're trying to raise that fly, it's catching on each shingle. Or, unlike any other training building, there's bushes in the way, there's trees in the way. So now we have to give them these real life scenarios to effectively perform these skills. At what training ground that has, I should say, what house do you know that is perfectly flat concrete, 360 degrees around that house? I
Yeah,
can't
with
think of
no
one
overhang.
with no overhang. So the side of our firehouse is a great spot to train guys on how to throw ladders because it's sloped. So now they have to figure out, well, if it's sloped, that's why we have the ladder chocks. It's a 4x4 and a wedge. That's why you need to bring them with you, especially if you're going on some of these houses that have sloped grades, because the ladder still got to get up and we still got to foot the ladder, and the ladder's got to be level. And this is why we carry these ladder chocks. And the 4x4 and a wedge is not the only way you can do it. I've seen a lot of ingenious ways to have ladder chocks. But even forcing entry, me, when I teach force entry, and we talked about this before in our training prop discussion, if you stick to the basics, you'll force every door. I will give a couple, if this doesn't work, then you can go to plan, you can go down your alphabet in your plans. But if you stick to those basics, you should be able to force a door. But, like throwing ladders or venting a roof, especially venting a roof, there's the book, the national standard for venting roofs is the louver cut, your 4x4 louver cut off a roof ladder. But in our department, in our area, that's not the go-to preferred method. And we teach the peak cut in the academy, but they get what? How many chances to do that peak cut?
Last class maybe did 2 each.
I mean, and that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Usually we talked about time frames in the academy. They might get one cut each on the roof prop doing a peak cut. That's where it falls on the company officer to go in and train them on that peak cut. And then you do it the way the skills that we want them to show it get done. And then we go through, well, this way might not work. So try this. And in the academy, it's, rip 4 vertical cuts and then try to get your horizontal across a peak. When I teach the guys on my company, real life stuff, that roof's going to be built up. You don't know what's underneath there. It could be OSB. It could be 1/2-inch plywood. It could be skip boarding. You honestly don't know what's under some of these older homes. So what I try to tell these guys in real life is as many vertical cuts as you can get. That's what you should be doing. We're shredding this roof apart, because the more cuts you get, the easier it is going to break that roofing material apart and open up that hole. I just had this discussion with one of the probationary firemen with throwing ladders, and we were throwing the bigger ladders. We were throwing a 28-footer and the 35-footer. And we got it up against a building, and the bed section was already resting up against the top of the roof. And he wanted to put the ladder vertical and hold that ladder vertical to raise a fly. I said, why were you doing that? He goes, well, that's the way you raise a ladder. I go, is it harder to keep this ladder vertical and raise the fly, or just leave the bed section against the building, raise the fly up, and then pull it out to the proper climbing angle? He goes, I never thought of that. The fly section's already cleared the roof. The bed's already is resting against the edge of the roof. The fly, all you have to do is put the fly up now and then bring it out to the proper climbing angle. Then even if you bring the fly section up and you don't have enough rungs, and you bring it out to the proper climbing angle, let's say you didn't put the fly up enough. You got 3 rungs, which is sufficient, but we like to have 5, and you need 2 more rungs above that roof line. You don't need to bring that roof ladder there. You don't need to bring that ladder back into the building and raise it up. That fly section will slide against the gutters. It will slide against the fascia of that roof. All you have to do is pull on that halyard, and it raises the roof, the ladder up to the proper height. And that's stuff that they don't show in the academy. That's stuff that we have to teach our probies when they get onto the companies. That's one of the things that we got to talk. It's not reprogramming. It's just, like I said, it's a trick or a trade.
So the other side of this is you're kind of also raising them, in the same token. Sometimes, yeah, you, like you said, you got the 40-something-year-old probationary member, but you also have the super young guys coming in 18, 19 years old, which that's kind of surprising to me. Around here, they can't drive the apparatus because of policies and everything that we have in our district. Sometimes laws do affect that as well, but for these guys that have no work experience at such a young age, do you feel like sometimes you're almost, boy, do I dare say it, parenting them at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had conversations with some of our younger probationary members and trying to give them a little bit of life experience lessons. I'm not their father. I'm not their brother. But I also at the same time, some of them, I'm twice their age, and I have to look out for them. And sometimes I do feel like a father. And I had this discussion before when I was newly promoted. It was the best company officer training I've ever had because of what was going on with the 2 guys I had. I was their financial advisor, their priest, their father, their brother. I was everything wrapped into one. But you said rating them. They do get rated. There's guys that rotate through your companies, and you have the discussion in a gentler, kinder way that you tell them you're not made out for a truck company, or you kind of eye them up and say, hey, you should really be on a truck company, or you're really you excel at. I shouldn't say you don't come out and flat say, hey, you're you're terrible. You don't belong on a truck company. You say, engine work's probably more your speed. You're more of a team player because a lot of engine work is more team based, humping hose and everything else, where truck company work can be more of an individual skill. And I'll be frank with you, if you don't have the physical ability to do some of the truck work, you shouldn't be working on a truck. We rate guys all the time, and it's not like I tell them you're not cut out for truck company stuff. I say, you're probably better off on the engine. And there are guys that say, I look at them and they do well while their time is on, while they're doing their rotation through the truck company. And it's like, yeah, I want this guy in my truck company. He can perform the tests that we need. And I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Truck company skills take, I would say, a different type of physical capability than engine company skills. I can teach my 13-year-old daughter to pull a dry hand line to the door, and how to stretch that proficiently. Now, once it's charged, it's a different story because the charge hand line is pretty heavy. But you have a team of firemen humping hose line, or a 28-foot ground ladder. You got to throw that on your own at some point. And there are some people, just the physical capabilities of people, that cannot do that. Can it change with some work in the gym and practice and technique? It can, but there are people that just don't want to do the work and don't want to get better at that. And I don't want them on my truck company if they can't perform that task.
Which seems harsh. And it's not. It's just fairness to the crew. And it's not to say that one company is better than the other. I think we've reiterated that quite a few times. It's just the nature of the primary skills that are required of those positions. It's a lot of work to hump hose. It's also a lot of work to single person throwing ladders.
I think it naturally sorts itself out too. There are people that are scared of heights, and I don't know why you would be a fireman, but if you're scared of heights, because there's going to be a time when you might be up on a roof or doing a rope rescue evolution. But it's just a natural phobia of people that are not comfortable up on a roof or not comfortable handling saws, and they tend to gravitate towards engine work. I already said it naturally kind of sorts itself out to where people gravitate to where they want to be.
Yeah, and that's why we encourage those. By encourage, I mean they're forced to do it, but we encourage those rotations. So for us, they just engine, truck, all try to get it inside your probationary period so that everybody gets to experience it, each rotate or each position, but also so the bosses on each out of those stations can also kind of view what's coming up the pipeline. You can't base everything off of somebody's probationary time either, but you start to get a little bit of a preview.
No, we talked about it with Mike previously. It's everybody needs to be a fireman. Everybody needs to be able to do all the basic tasks that are required of you on the job. But if you are assigned to a company, a truck company or engine company, you should be a master of the skills that are required for you to be on that company.
And CPR.
And CPR. I mean, I've worked on this truck company for, I don't know, more than half my career. I'll still go out and pull hose lines when I'm working on the engine on overtime, or I'll still go out there and see what the pump operator's doing, or give my 2 cents of my experiences of when I was on the engine. But at the same time, I'm going to rely on the guys that work on those engine companies 24 hours a day to maybe teach me something that, hey, I might have forgot something. Or when we switch to 7/8 tip nozzles on the engines, they can explain to me why that's the latest and greatest thing, that the 7/8 tip is better than the 15/16 that we have on our Quint. I just say, well, there's a weight room. If you can't handle a 15/16, that's why you're on the engine. But that's a joke for another day, I guess, or a discussion. But like we're all firemen at the end of the day. Everybody's got to be able to pull hose lines. Everybody's got to be able to throw ladders. It's just the guys that like pulling hose lines and enjoy that pump operating stuff. They gravitate towards the engine. The guys that like throwing ladders, the cutting roofs, getting up at heights, maybe a little bit more danger stuff, they gravitate towards the truck company. And I'm not saying the truck company is more dangerous than the engine, just the aspect of being up on a roof, untethered. It is what it is.
You don't really pack a parachute with you as much as having a hose line in the room with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like to be tied down to a hose line when I'm going inside. I want to be in fast, quick, and efficient, getting the searches done. Yeah, that's another thing that the guys have a discussion with our probies. Is they just number one thing is keep up with all of us, and that's one thing I gotta learn to do, especially when the newer probies come around, like fresh out of the academies. I gotta learn to slow down a little bit on the fire ground because I have a probie behind me at this point.
Yeah, they're grabbing hold of your jacket and just tagging along everywhere you go.
And it's not a bad thing. Slowing down is not a bad thing, but they also have to learn that there's a speed aspect to speed and efficiency to searching, and that comes with training and experience. So
Anything else about bringing probies up at the
I,
company officer level? Your senior guys, your instructors.
I feel like just as company officers, you got to rely on your senior guys to do a lot of the legwork. As a company officer, you're more of like mom or dad. When something goes wrong, that's when they should be coming to the company officer. Most of the training, in my mind, should be handled by the senior guy bringing the probie up. That's not saying that the company officer relinquishes all responsibility during the drills or what happens during the day. Company officer still needs to be a part of the training, and if there's something specific, SOG wise, departmental wise, it's got to be ran by the company officer. But the day-to-day stuff, going through the rig, firehouse tasks, firehouse duties, probationary duties, that should all be handled by the black hats, by the firemen, the guys that are doing the work day in and day out. The company officers got a lot of stuff they got to worry about. They got the computer scheduling, dealing with other stuff that the firemen don't deal with. But the buck stops with the company officer. He is still ultimately responsible for what happens with that probie. And the biggest thing, this goes to instructing at the academy, and it goes to when you get a probationary fireman. When that probie leaves my company and rotates through or gets an assigned to that other probie, I feel like he's your kid, releasing him out to the world type of thing. And I don't want my reputation being tarnished by a probie that doesn't perform well. So that makes me give some ownership onto myself of training him the way he needs to be trained, because I don't want the next company officer to look at this probie and like, well, what the hell happened while you're with Lou? And it's like, I know Lou didn't train you on this, or I know Lou didn't teach you this. So what's going on here? I don't want that. I don't want my reputation being tarnished by a probie that wasn't trained correctly. And I think my guys that work for me feel the same way.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily. I think sometimes people can hear that and think that that's comes from a egocentric point of view. It's not that at all. It's got nothing to do with ego. It's a checks and balances of how you're teaching and how you're operating. Am I slacking somewhere that I shouldn't, or do I need to retail something because it's evolving? Am I still putting out the best for them? And if you're getting, it's a feedback, really. If you're getting feedback from somebody being less than exceptional, it means it's time to evolve a little bit. That's all. I
Yeah,
just want to point that out to
100%.
people listening.
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
So that wraps it up. I think, like I said, we'll probably repeat ourselves again with some of the stuff we have. We've already repeated ourselves with some of the stuff we discussed tonight. Make sure you check us out on Instagram. Fire from two windows. What's the email again?
Yeah, get your notebooks out, jot this one down. It's firefromtwowindows@gmail.com. We got a couple Q&As that we're lining up. So as long as we get I'm trying to group these questions in similar categories so it's not all sporadic. But filter in your questions and we'll see if we can get those answered or direct or bring some people on to answer those who are more appropriately fitting. Or if you just got general comments, hey, this thing's shit. Well, let us know. We're glad to hear your criticism. It's what drives us. Like we said on the last podcast with our buddy Mike, he said he likes to be the catalyst. I can't get over it. I still think he should make t-shirts. Got to be out there talking. And if we're getting some conversation going, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and hopefully our next one, if not the next one, coming up soon. We got lined up. We had a fire in a district to the east side of the city where a guy on our job and his volley company fell through the floor. He's got him and his chief got a pretty good, hopefully a good discussion about that, lessons learned. So hopefully that's coming up soon. Once we nail them down, that should be a good discussion.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a good one. So I think that's all we got for tonight. What do you think there, Matt?
That's it.